Dr. Lily Grant stood before the vast council chamber, her heart pounding in her chest. The Galactic Council had assembled to discuss Earth's future among the stars, and her voice was the only thing standing between humanity's survival and an uncertain fate. The enormous chamber hummed with an energy that almost felt oppressive, its gleaming walls reflecting the alien species gathered in their floating seats. A hush fell over the room as the Eridani representative, a tall figure whose voice seemed to echo from the very core of the universe, stood to speak. The alien's presence alone commanded attention, their elongated form and shimmering skin an unsettling reminder of how small humanity truly was in the grand scheme of the cosmos. The Eridani speak for the galaxy. The Eridani began, their voice as cold as the vacuum of space. We have observed the human race for centuries, and we believe the time has come to address your future, or the lack thereof. You stand on the edge of becoming a catastrophic force. Your unchecked militarism, rapid technological advancement, and your inability to control the power you are so eager to harness have made you a risk to galactic stability. The time for Earth's submission is at hand. Your species will either accept our governance or face extinction. Dr. Grant clenched her fists at her sides, the words burning through her like fire. The Eridani spoke with the authority of a civilization that had existed for millennia, their arrogance palpable. For years, humanity had worked tirelessly to join this council, to prove itself as a capable and peaceful member of the intergalactic community. And now, one alien species, one ancient, supposedly all-knowing species, had the audacity to declare them a threat. A chill swept through her as she realized how deeply humanity had underestimated their place in the galaxy. She had known this day was coming, but hearing it spoken so plainly, so coldly, made her blood boil. But she wouldn't back down. She couldn't. Clearing her throat, Dr. Grant stepped forward, her voice steady but firm as she addressed the council. I understand your concerns, but your assessment of humanity is both outdated and flawed. What you failed to grasp is that humanity is not a stagnant species. We are not the same as we were 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 years ago. We evolve. We adapt. We survive. And yes, we innovate. Our greatest strength lies in our ability to confront the unknown, to defy the expectations placed upon us, and to rise to challenges that others might shrink from. A murmur of surprise rippled through the chamber, the council members exchanging glances as they considered her words. They hadn't expected this, an Earth representative who dared to challenge the very foundation of their authority. Humanity has made mistakes, Dr. Grant continued, pacing slowly before the council. We have stumbled, we have fought wars, and we have struggled to understand our place in the universe. But unlike other species, we have the capacity to learn from our mistakes. We have the drive to grow beyond them. You look at our rapid technological advancements and see a danger. But I see the potential for a species that has just begun to unlock its true power. That is exactly what we fear. The Eridani retorted, its gaze cold. Your rapid rise could destabilize the very fabric of galactic peace. We've seen what happens when species with little regard for the consequences of their actions gain too much power. And yet, Dr. Grant shot back, you ignore the countless examples of civilizations that have grown beyond their violent pasts. The Kalara Empire, the Sealnik Syndicate, even the Threxians, all once brutal species, now peaceful, respected members of this council. They, too, were seen as threats when they were in their infancy. But they were given a chance, and they evolved. Humanity deserves the same. The Eridani's eyes narrowed, but Dr. Grant could sense the growing unease among the other council members. She was pushing them, testing their patience, but she had no other choice. If humanity was to survive, if they were to have any hope of taking their place among the stars, she had to make them see the truth. Humanity is not a threat, she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. But if you continue to treat us as one, if you continue to dictate our future based on your own fears, you will force our hand. And that is a risk no one should take. The galaxy does not want a war with Earth, but if you push us, if you force us into a corner, we will fight. Not because we want to, but because we have to. A stunned silence fell over the room. Dr. Grant had made her statement, and it was clear now that there was no going back. The council could not ignore her, could not dismiss the implications of her words. Humanity had no choice but to fight for its future. As the council deliberated, an eerie hum filled the room, followed by a sharp, disorienting jolt. Dr. Grant's eyes shot up in alarm as the chamber's lights flickered, casting an unnatural shadow across the council seats. A voice rang out over the comms, tense and frantic. "Council members, we have a situation. A rogue faction of the Eridani has just launched an attack on one of our ships. We are under fire." The room erupted into chaos. Representatives scrambled to their stations, sending out orders, activating defenses. But Dr. Grant could hardly process the scene around her. Her mind was still racing with the ramifications of what had just happened. The Eridani, so sure of their control, had just declared war, not on Earth, but on the entire Council. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp voice. "Dr. Grant, we need your help. The Council ship is under attack, and Earth's quantum energy technology is the only way to stop them." Dr. Grant turned to the source of the voice. It was Thomas Wilder, Earth's ambassador, his face pale with concern. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tight. "The rogue Eridani faction, whatever they've unleashed, it's disrupting the Council's communications, their defense systems. Your quantum energy field, the one you've been studying, it's the only technology we have that can counter this." Her mind raced. It was true. Earth had developed a quantum energy field capable of disrupting even the most advanced alien technology. But she had never imagined using it in such a high-stakes scenario. If this didn't work. But there was no time to hesitate. She had to act. "Prepare the transmission," Dr. Grant said, her voice now steady, commanding. "If we don't stop them, there may not be a council left to save." She rushed to the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys as she initiated the process. Her plan was a gamble, broadcasting the quantum field directly into the heart of the rogue faction's weapons systems. It could either disable them, or make things worse. But Dr. Grant had never believed in playing it safe. As the energy field powered up, she felt a quiet surge of hope. Earth had already proven itself capable of facing impossible odds. It was time for humanity to show the galaxy what it was really made of. The transmission was ready. All she had to do now was press send. Dr. Grant stood before the Council's emergency communications terminal, her fingers trembling slightly as they hovered over the final sequence. The rogue Eridani faction had launched an unexpected attack on the Galactic Council's flagship, and the clock was ticking. Earth's quantum energy technology was humanity's best chance to neutralize the threat, but the device had never been tested under combat conditions. There were no guarantees. She glanced at Thomas Wilder, standing beside her, his face pale, anxiety etched into every line of his features. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked, his voice low and tight. "If we fail, we don't have a choice," Dr. Grant replied, her voice firm, cutting off his words. "This is the only way to stop them. I'm not risking the Council's survival or humanity's future on the chance that we can talk our way out of this." Thomas swallowed, nodding, though his doubt remained unspoken. Just make sure it works, Lily." She nodded once, steeling herself. The weight of the moment was heavier than she'd ever imagined, but she couldn't falter. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. Dr. Grant's hands moved quickly over the console, the hum of the ship's systems providing a steady rhythm to her actions. She input the final command, the quantum field generators across Earth's diplomatic ships coming to life, their energies flowing into a central conduit. The field would destabilize the rogue Eridani faction's weapons, but it would also leave Earth vulnerable to retaliation. The galaxy would either accept humanity as a powerful, unpredictable force, or crush it altogether. A voice broke the tension. It was Counselor Jmek, a reptilian diplomat from the Ixian League. "Dr. Grant, the transmission is ready. You may initiate at any time. We trust your judgment." She looked up, meeting the gazes of the various council members. Their expressions were unreadable, the silence oppressive. Some of them were openly skeptical, Others seemed resigned to the fact that humanity had come to this point. The Eridani had forced their hand. "Here goes nothing," Dr. Grant muttered under her breath, her fingers pressing the final sequence. The quantum field detonated across the communication network, sending waves of energy cascading through the nearby ships. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, then, as if the universe itself exhaled, the field surged forward. The rogue Eridani faction's weapons shut down. The ship's hull flickered, its offensive systems scrambling to reboot. Dr. Grant exhaled slowly, her heart racing. She'd done it. The Council's fleet was safe, for now. But the rogue faction's presence wasn't entirely neutralized. It was just the beginning of a much bigger confrontation. "They've been disarmed," she confirmed, barely above a whisper, still watching the readouts flicker on the screen. "The field worked." Thomas exhaled sharply, his face showing a mix of relief and lingering apprehension. "That's good, right?" Dr. Grant didn't respond immediately. Her thoughts were elsewhere, piecing together the ramifications of their actions. The Eridani faction had attacked the Council, an unprecedented move. That could mean the galaxy was teetering on the edge of something far worse than a diplomatic incident. She turned back to the Council. "We've neutralized their weapons. But this isn't over. The rogue Eridani are still out there, and they'll regroup. We need to prepare for a counterattack. We're aware." Councillor Tra, a tall, stoic member of the Election Union, spoke with a calm authority. "But your intervention has given us time. We will initiate countermeasures, but it's clear that Earth holds a key position in this conflict. We're not just talking about defense anymore. We're talking about leadership." Dr. Grant blinked, taken aback by the unexpected praise. "Leadership?" she echoed. "Yes," Tavra continued. "Your species is resilient. You've proven that. And now, with the use of this quantum field, you've demonstrated that Earth holds a technological advantage. You may be young, but you have the power to lead." The words felt strange, as though they were meant for someone else. Earth, a young species, leading? It wasn't something anyone had ever expected. Certainly not her. But now, here she was, on the front lines of a galactic conflict, wielding humanity's most advanced technology like a weapon. "This isn't about power," Dr. Grant replied, her voice measured, her mind still racing. "It's about survival. We can't allow our species to be seen as a threat to the galaxy. That's not what we are." Councillor Jmek shifted in his seat, his eyes narrowing. "It's too late for that. The Eridani have made their move. Earth is now a significant player in this conflict. Whether you like it or not, the galaxy will look to you for leadership. But we're not ready," Dr. Grant argued, though the seed of doubt had already been planted. The rogue Eridani had underestimated humanity, thinking that they could break them with a single strike. But Dr. Grant had proven them wrong. And now, as the galaxy turned its gaze upon Earth, the weight of responsibility became suffocating. Could they truly rise to the occasion? The terminal beeped, interrupting her thoughts. A transmission was incoming, marked with the unmistakable Eridani signal. "Put it through," Dr. Grant ordered, her voice unwavering. The image on the screen flickered to life, revealing an imposing figure. A member of the rogue Eridani faction. The creature's skin was a deep shade of purple, veins glowing with an eerie light beneath the surface. Its eyes narrowed as it stared directly at Dr. Grant. "You," the Eridani hissed. "You've delayed the inevitable, human. The galaxy does not belong to you. You cannot stop us." Dr. Grant held its gaze, unflinching. "I've stopped you once. I'll do it again if I have to." The rogue Eridani's expression twisted into something resembling a smirk. "You think you have the power to stand against us? We are ancient. You are nothing but children." Dr. Grant leaned forward, her voice steady and calm. "Maybe we're children. But we're children who have learned to fight." With that, she cut the transmission. The rogue faction would retreat for now. But this was far from over. Dr. Grant knew that Earth's role in this conflict was far larger than anyone had imagined. "This isn't over, is it?" Thomas said quietly, still standing by her side. He was staring at the screen, his expression distant. "No," Dr. Grant replied, her voice hardened. "It's only just begun." The room fell silent again. It wasn't a silence of uncertainty this time, but one of resolve. The galaxy had just been introduced to Earth's true potential, and whether they were ready or not, humanity was here to stay. The stakes had been raised. Earth had shown its strength. And now, the real battle for the future would begin. The buzzing of the Council's emergency communications system shattered the tense silence. Dr. Grant's fingers hovered over the console, her mind still racing. The rogue Eridani faction had just launched their second attack, and this time, they were targeting the Council's flagship. Humanity's greatest gamble was about to either pay off or crumble under its own weight. If the quantum energy field didn't work, everything would be lost. "Lily!" Thomas Wilder's voice was tight, his eyes not leaving the screen as he watched the growing chaos unfolding across the Council's fleet. "If this doesn't work, we're all dead." She glanced at him but didn't respond. The plan was simple but dangerous. The quantum field had been the key to disabling the rogue faction's weapons earlier, but now, the situation had escalated. Their attack wasn't just an isolated strike. It was a full-scale offensive, aimed directly at the heart of the Council's defense network. A flicker of doubt crossed Dr. Grant's mind as she looked over the quantum field's projected readouts. It was still untested at full capacity. The field could disrupt the rogue faction's weapons, but if it overcharged, it might destroy the Council's entire communication infrastructure. This wasn't just about disabling alien tech anymore. It was about taking control of a galactic network. "Do it," Dr. Grant said, her voice surprisingly steady. She could feel the eyes of the Council members on her, even if they were scattered throughout their individual ships. She pressed the final command, sending the quantum energy pulse across the fleet. The energy output rippled outward from Earth's ships, crackling through the Council's communications array. For a moment, nothing happened. Dr. Grant's breath caught in her throat. Then, a burst of static filled the room as the rogue Eridani ship's weapons flickered and shut down. The holographic displays surrounding the Council's chambers showed that the immediate threat had been neutralized. "We've done it," Dr. Grant whispered, but her voice held no satisfaction. They were still vulnerable. For now. The rogue faction's ships were disabled, but the fleet was in disarray. The Council ships had been heavily damaged during the first wave of attacks, and now, the rogue Eridani faction's fleet was beginning to regroup. Dr. Grant knew it wasn't enough just to defend, they needed to go on the offensive, or this would be a stalemate with no winners. She turned to the terminal and opened a secure channel to the Council's leaders. The room buzzed with confusion, the Council members in various states of panic. Some had been caught off guard by the rogue faction's sudden aggression. Others were too shaken to make decisions. She had to take charge. "Counselors," Dr. Grant's voice rang out, firm and unwavering. "We've made progress, but this is far from over. We cannot simply wait for them to regroup. It's time to strike." "Strike?" Counselor Jmeka's voice crackled through the speaker. "Are you out of your mind? Our fleet is crippled. We're in no position to launch an offensive. We don't have the luxury of waiting," Dr. Grant replied, her tone sharp. "The rogue faction is already regrouping. If we don't act now, they'll be in position to wipe us out. This is our chance to break their momentum. Earth's been nothing but a thorn in their side," Thomas added, stepping forward. "If we can keep them on the defensive, we might just have a shot. We don't even know where their command ship is," Counselor Tra said, his voice cautious. "How do you propose we target them without that intel? Earth's quantum technology doesn't just disrupt their weapons," Dr. Grant said. "It can also track and disrupt their communication systems. If we amplify the signal, we can pinpoint their command vessel's location. Once we have it, we can neutralize them. Amplifying the signal is risky," Counselor Jmek argued. "It might take out our own systems." "We'll take that risk," Dr. Grant said firmly. "This is our only chance. We either stop them now or we lose everything." A long silence followed, the weight of the decision hanging in the air. Dr. Grant could sense the council members' hesitation. They didn't trust humanity. They didn't trust her, not fully. But there was no more time for doubt. "I'll do it," she said, her voice resolute. "I'll initiate the amplification. Give me control." There was a long pause before Counselor Truss spoke, his voice tinged with reluctant approval. "You have control, Dr. Grant. But know this, if this fails, you will have condemned us all." Dr. Grant nodded, her fingers flying over the console once more. She entered the sequence to amplify the quantum pulse. The screens in front of her flickered as the energy surged through the ships, each pulse pushing the boundaries of the technology they had been working with for years. Her heart raced, but her mind remained focused. The rogue faction's communication systems were scrambling. The signals she needed to find their command ship were there, hidden in the mess of static and interference. "I've got it," she muttered, leaning closer to the console. The location appeared, blinking on the screen. She could almost feel the pulse of energy, the threads of fate converging on that one pinpoint in the vastness of space. She didn't have time to second-guess herself. "Target locked," Dr. Grant confirmed. "I'm initiating the attack now." As the final command left her lips, the quantum pulse hit its mark, sending a cascade of energy surging toward the rogue faction's flagship. For a moment, the ships held their breath as the energy coursed through the void. The rogue Eridani fleet was caught off guard, their command vessel flickering as the communication systems were overloaded. The rogue ships began to falter, their weapons malfunctioning, their shields dropping. The battlefield was chaos. Ships in every direction began to break formation as their commands crumbled. The rogue faction was in disarray. "We've done it," Thomas said, his voice edged with disbelief. "They're disorganized. We can hit them now." "Not yet," Dr. Grant replied, her voice calm but firm. "We need to wait. We can't risk them regrouping. I'll initiate one final amplification to take out their remaining defenses." She keyed in the sequence again, amplifying the pulse for one final, massive strike. This time, the rogue faction's flagship was engulfed in a field of energy, its systems overwhelmed. The signal faded, and for a long moment, nothing seemed to move. And then, the confirmation came. "It's done," Dr. Grant said quietly. "The rogue faction's command ship is down." The council chamber fell into stunned silence. The threat had been eliminated, by Earth's hands. We did it," Thomas said, almost in awe. "Yes," Dr. Grant replied, a deep breath escaping her. "We did." The rogue faction of the Eridani was not defeated. Dr. Grant knew it. She felt the tension building even as the systems blinked back to life. Their fleet had been thrown into disarray, but they would regroup. They always did. Humanity's greatest victory could quickly turn to ashes if they didn't act decisively now. "Dr. Grant," Thomas said, his voice steady but tight with urgency. "The Council is calling for a report. They want to know if we've truly neutralized the threat. If the signal works, we need to move fast before they reorganize." She didn't need to be told. The rogue faction had taken down the flagship once before. It could happen again. The quantum pulse had disrupted their communications, and that had been their advantage. But how long could they keep them from re-establishing contact with their forces? "Patch me through to the Council," she ordered, her voice already hardening with resolve. The screens flickered for a moment before a familiar face appeared, a reptilian figure, Counselor Jmek. "Dr. Grant," Jmek said, the calmness in his voice belying the tension she knew was running through the Council. "Report. I've disabled their command vessel, at least temporarily. The quantum pulse has scrambled their communication systems, and their weapons are malfunctioning. But this is only a temporary fix. They'll find a way to compensate. If we don't press the advantage now, we risk losing everything." Jmek's eyes narrowed, his sharp features accentuating his growing concern. "The rogue faction won't sit idle. But Earth doesn't have the forces to launch a full-scale attack. We need to regroup with the rest of the Council." Dr. Grant's eyes darted back to the console. Time was running out. The Council's fleet is too scattered. They'll need time to coordinate, and by then, The rogue faction will be operational again. We can't afford to wait. There's another option, Thomas interjected, stepping forward. Dr. Grant's quantum field might be our only chance. We could amplify it, send a pulse so powerful that it completely disables their systems. No more scrambling, no more waiting for them to recover. And risk our own systems failing? Counselor Tra spoke from the Council's side channel, his tone skeptical. You are suggesting Earth take the lead in a decisive strike, even knowing the dangers? We don't have a choice, Dr. Grant replied firmly. If we don't act now, we will lose control of this situation. Jamek hesitated. You ask us to place the future of the entire galaxy in Earth's hands, without knowing the consequences. Dr. Grant met his gaze, unflinching. I'm asking you to place the future of the galaxy in humanity's hands. We've already shown that we can disrupt the rogue faction. Let us finish the job. There was a long silence. The entire council waited, weighing the risks. Dr. Grant could feel the pressure mounting, but her mind was made up. Earth had already proven itself. They could either step forward into leadership or be wiped out in the next wave of conflict. It was humanity's moment to rise. Finally, Jamek spoke, his voice surprisingly resolute. Very well. Amplify the pulse. But know this, Dr. Grant, this is your decision, and the responsibility lies with you. She nodded once, her hands already moving toward the controls. The quantum pulse would need to be amplified by a factor of 10 to ensure complete disruption of the rogue faction's systems. The risk was immense. One miscalculation and their technology would be beyond their reach. 2. The Council's fleet, Earth's fleet, everything depended on the precise calibration of the pulse. Her fingers flew across the keys, inputting the sequence. The console hummed with energy, a low vibration that seemed to resonate with the gravity of the moment. Her mind was focused, calculating the exact output needed for the amplification. Every second felt like an eternity. I'm initiating the amplification now, she said, her voice steady but filled with anticipation. The pulse rippled out, first slowly, then faster, growing in intensity with each passing moment. The screens blinked erratically as the pulse expanded, and Dr. Grant's heart raced. It wasn't just a signal anymore. It was a wave, crashing toward the rogue faction's fleet with the power to reshape the balance of the conflict. The question was, would it be enough? The first signs came in an instant. The rogue faction's vessels began to lose formation. Shields flickered, weapons went silent. The Eridani, those ancient warriors who had believed themselves untouchable, were suddenly helpless in the face of the human-made energy wave. For a brief, exhilarating moment, Dr. Grant felt a surge of triumph. It was working. They had done it. But just as quickly, the console flared with new alerts. More ships appearing on the edge of the rogue fleet's range, reinforcements. This wasn't over. Dr. Grant's pulse quickened. The rogue faction hadn't been entirely neutralized. There was a larger force hidden in the depths of space, ready to pounce. No, Dr. Grant whispered. They've called for reinforcements. Get a fix on their position, Thomas said urgently. We need to know how many ships they've sent. She inputted the coordinates into the system, running diagnostics at lightning speed. The rogue faction had sent another fleet, a much larger one that could overwhelm the entire council. If they didn't stop it now, it would be too late. Earth's efforts, all of humanity's work, could be undone in a matter of hours. I've got them, she said, her fingers moving faster now, setting up a new sequence. If we hit them at the right angle, we can disable their communication systems and slow them down. But it will have to be precise. The gravity of the situation was not lost on anyone in the room. The fate of the galaxy, and humanity, was now in their hands. Dr. Grant hesitated for a moment, knowing that one wrong move could mean the end. But humanity had already defied the odds once. It had to again. Do it, Jamek commanded. Take the shot. With a sharp nod, Dr. Grant activated the new pulse, aiming it directly at the incoming rogue fleet. The energy field shot out like a spear, streaking across the dark void of space. For a moment, it felt like time stopped. Then the pulse hit its mark. There was a flash of energy so bright it momentarily blinded the sensors. When the light faded, the results were immediate. The rogue fleet's ships faltered, their weapons and shields disabled, their engines grinding to a halt. Dr. Grant exhaled slowly, her breath catching as she watched the final wave of the pulse stabilize. The enemy was at a standstill. "We did it," Thomas breathed, disbelief in his voice. But Dr. Grant didn't celebrate. She wasn't done yet. The rogue faction might be stalled, but the war was far from over. For now, Earth had taken its place on the galactic stage. For now, humanity had won. "This isn't over," Dr. Grant said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "This is just the beginning."